Okay, so last video, this is my own team's video review. So I think I have my team listed as number 10. So just to give a little FYI, let me get some coffee, but just to give a little FYI on this video before we begin. Since this video is my own team, this might be longer than even the others. Most of the others are averaging around like 30 to 40 minutes. Most of them are around 40. This might be longer because I'll actually talk about what I was thinking in real time. I actually made notes during the draft on my little draft paper about what I was thinking, kind of my strategy going into it, just to give each of you, I guess, a general idea of what I kind of do during these chaotic auction drafts, and just kind of like, I don't know, for some of you, maybe you need help with the draft, maybe you're not really sure, maybe you're interested in knowing just someone else's perspective. I don't know. But just kind of, I'm going to deep dive, I guess, more so than anything else, into what was going on in my head while the draft was going on and why I did what I did. Because I don't really love my team. I did make mistakes, but I digress. So, starting things off, 18 overall, $5 on a backup running back, Jordan Mason. All right, so kind of going along with this, I had already seen Andre spend $79 on Christian McCaffrey. He'd already spent $77 on Breece Hall. So by this point in the draft, and he spent, the pick before was Aaron Jones for $27. So at this point in the draft, I knew he was essentially capped out. He only had, He only had, $4 to spend on one more player. I already saw that. So I was just like, at most, unless someone else is coming in and wants to try and bid him up, at most he can spend $4 on Jordan Mason. I might as well try and go get him now. Now, I had mentioned last year, I really like Jordan Mason. Some background on Jordan Mason. He was a starter at Georgia Tech for 4 years. Why is that important? There's a lot of starters in college football. Well, before last year, at the University of Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs was really good, and he was a first-round pick last year by the Lions, right? Well, if we go back before that year in Alabama, so if we go back 3 years when he was a sophomore, he was the backup or splitting carries with none other than Jordan Mason. Very, very good backfield at Georgia Tech all the way back in 2021. So, but Jordan Mason split the backfield with him, and before that, he was the man in like 2019, 2020. So, I had kept my eye on him for a while in college football. Just one of those guys where you're just like, oh, he's pretty good. I wonder what will happen eventually. Well, here we are. It's 2024. Elijah Mitchell is gone with a season-ending injury. No more Tyrion Price either. I remember, I think Brian took him a couple years ago. No more like Trey Sermon here. Trey Sermon's in like Indy. All these picks that Kyle Shanahan has made over the years, Matt Breida, he's gone. Raheem Mostert got traded. Jeff Wilson Jr. got traded. All those guys became something. So is McCaffrey better than all those guys? Yeah, of course. He's Christian McCaffrey. He's on a Hall of Fame track. But the reason why I wanted Jordan Mason is because I've followed Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason by himself right now is probably good enough to be a starting running back. He's a perfect fit for this West Coast offense. And if anything were to happen to McCaffrey, I would know. I had McCaffrey twice, and he twice had season-ending injuries for me. Then Jordan Mason would be the guy. Jordan Mason would be the guy in probably the best rushing offense in the NFL. I would say, I guess the number one rushing offense would be the Lions, but based on scheme, it might be the 49ers. So whatever you want to go, we'll just say the 49ers are at least top 3. At the very least, they're in the top 3. If you want to put Sean McVay and Kyron Williams at 2, that's fine. But the point is, if anything were to happen to McCaffrey, I think Jordan Mason not just jumps up in the top 10. I think he's a top 5 running back just based on scheme, fit, and player talent. So he's 5'11", 223 pounds. He's a pretty good pass catcher, pretty good run blocker, and his running style reminds me of, like, he's a big bruising back, even at 5'11". So he's a little bit different than McCaffrey. He doesn't glide like McCaffrey. But his running style reminds me of, like, very early Leonard Fournette, if I'm being honest. Just a violent runner. I think usually spending money on backups isn't great, but for high-end handcuffs, I think it's a good deal. Like, I think if you think, like, there are differences, for example. So the backup, like, let's say Alvin Kamara gets hurt and the backup is Jamal Williams, right? Well, I mean, some people might have liked Jamal Williams in Green Bay. They might have liked him that year. He led the league with touchdowns with the Lions. But if something happened to Alvin Kamara, how valuable would Jamal Williams really be? His skill set doesn't match that of Kamara at all. They're more complementary than replacement. He's not a great pass catcher. He's not a great run blocker. He's just kind of a big bruising back who doesn't have good vision. He kind of just plods along. So the point is, especially with handcuffs, a lot of people just want to get the handcuff to their guy. For me, especially over the years I've kind of learned this, I don't want to just get regular handcuffs to, like, any guy in a situation. Like, there's differences. Like, there's a difference between the backup last year to Alexander Madison is Ty Chandler and somebody becomes Cam Akers, and the backup to Cam Akers is, like, Kyren Williams. Well, Kyren Williams is way better than, like, Ty Chandler, obviously. But you kind of want to suss out what the situation looks like, what's the offense look like, and who would get the opportunity. Like, there's a big drop-off between Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford. While I think McCaffrey is excellent and great, and he's the number one fantasy back, I think if he gets hurt, Jordan Mason's still a top 7 fantasy back. So the drop-off isn't as significant, and that has a lot to do with scheme, but also has a lot to do with how good Mason is, too. So, anyway, the point is, I saw an opportunity. I was just like, Mason's really good. I don't know if he'll get the chance. Maybe late in the season something happens. I know McCaffrey has a calf strain. Point is, I haven't spent any money. Let's just go for it. Like, it's a little bit, it gets a little bit hairy later on in the draft for me because of this, but that was my thinking. So, 20 overall, $57, A.J. Brown. So, here's my first mistake. So, I like A.J. Brown. Part of the reason why he was on my draft board so high, I think I had it to be Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and I had one more guy ahead of A.J. Brown. Wasn't CeeDee Lamb. I don't believe in CeeDee Lamb, to be honest with you. And it wasn't Puka either. Jamar Chase. So I had Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Jamar Chase ahead of A.J. Brown. And I believe all of them had already gone. So I really liked A.J. Brown. I've liked him since his Tennessee days. But the reason why I was high on him this year is people forget. Basically, I want to say in like the first 9 games. So the first 9 games before the bye week for the Eagles, I think they only lost 1 game. Basically, A.J. Brown was the leading MVP vote getter. Like, that's how big a season he was on pace for having. And that was despite Tyreek Hill going for like 18, like trying to go for 2,000 yards. A.J. Brown was scoring basically a touchdown a game. He was getting over 100 yards a game. He was just chewing up defenses. Now, granted, it all fell apart on the back end. And it was kind of funny. Like, Mac makes this big trade, and A.J. Brown's having this crazy season. And then he starts going downhill. I chalked that up more to everything going on with the Eagles last year. I think they'll bounce back, especially because they replaced offensive coordinator Brian Johnson with Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore helped develop CeeDee Lamb. He had that monster season with Keenan Allen last year. I think Kellen Moore is a quality offensive coach, and they'll use a lot more, not a lot more play action, but a lot more of just like reads. They'll do a lot more of pre-snap motion as well, which I love. I love pre-snap motion. It's perfect for telling coverages early. It'll help Jalen Hurts a lot. But the point is, I had A.J. Brown as like my 4th best fantasy receiver. I was kind of pushing Stefan on this, and I had Brown as like a $67 player. So I see him. He's the first player on the board, basically the first 20 picks, except for like Mason, where I'm just like, that feels like a discount. Like, going in the draft, I was kind of thinking, maybe I want to be patient. I noticed last year there's a lot of running backs on the back end who went for like very cheap. Not that it, but like we'll get into that a little bit later. But I was just like, I don't know if I really want to like how long I want to wait, because at some point you kind of just got to go. And something else that I talked about this year is just like, you basically need to have like 2 stars to win a title. Like, one of those stars has to be a top 5 running back. No, there's one outlier team. We won't get into that. Holly's team. We'll get too deep into that again. But Holly's team's the only team to not have a top 5 running back to win a title. So basically, you need a top 5 running back. But who the second star is doesn't really matter. It could be another running back. It could be like MVP version quarterback, but you have to be really lucky to get that. It could be a starting top wide receiver. So the way the draft was going, I was just like, the first 19 picks, other than Mason, everybody's going like pretty high. All these running backs are going really high. I'm not sure I can get any of these running backs to be like the second star. And the wide receivers that I like are already gone. So do I want to go for AJ or not? So I was looking at it. It's going up. We're in the 50s. I got like maybe 30 seconds left, and I'm just like, all right, we'll push this to like 60. And so we went to 57, and we got A.J. Brown. I don't feel great about it because I don't like building on receivers. As I showed last year, I literally drafted Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, and Aaron Jones, and they were all injured at some point in the season, missing games. And I still figured it out because I know I can figure it out. It's much more difficult to get running backs. But receivers, I'm usually just kind of going cheap on receivers because you can find good values at receiver. But with this, I'm kind of like, it's a discount on Brown, even though I don't love it, because last year, again, towards the end of the season, he was bad because the offense fell apart. I'm still like, I still had him graded where I had him graded. It's kind of like in the actual NFL draft, you're watching the picks go, and you're kind of like, my guy is someone I don't love is there, but my pick is up, and I feel like I'm getting him for a discount. I might as well go get him. So I went and got him. But that kind of comes back to bite me, and that's kind of why now, looking back at it, I kind of wish I didn't go get him, and I kind of wish I went like budget at wide receiver. Again, we'll get into that a little bit. So 29 overall, Derrick Henry $66. So as I mentioned before, you basically have to have a top 5 running back to win a title. You can kind of maybe get away with it if you've really built the team out. Like, for example, if I had beaten Mac in the championship round last year, I technically didn't have a top 5 back because Kamara, Taylor, and Jones all missed enough time to not be in the top 5. But I mean, honestly, like, they were all really good when they played, so it's not like I really felt like none of them were top 5 backs. They were all top 5 backs when healthy. It just so happened none of them were healthy until I needed them to be in the playoffs, which is part of the reason why I made a run to the finals. So, but the point is, it's tremendously difficult to get to where you want to go without top 5 back. So by this point, we've seen most of the backs go. Bijan's gone for 80. Obviously, Andre spent 79 on McCaffrey, spent 77 on Breece Hall. I watched Kamara go for 55. I watched Saquon go for 69. Jonathan Taylor go for 70. Jahmyr Gibbs go for 67. So I'm waiting. Basically on the board, what's left, like, we saw Joe Mixon go for 42. So I'm like, you're not, Josh Jacobs went for, I think right before this, like 35. So I'm like, I don't really even like Josh Jacobs because of LaFleur. But we're waiting. I'm kind of waiting with like Robbie and Brian. And I'm waiting. And the only 2 backs kind of left on the board that I really like are Pachenko and Henry. I know I don't really want Pachenko. I think Pachenko will have a very good season. But I don't really want him just because, like, I feel like with all the pass catchers brought in to Kansas City, there's just going to be like going back to Mahomes just slinging around for like 40 touchdowns, which doesn't lead to a whole lot of rushing. So I just felt like we're getting down to it. If I like one of these guys and I think they'll be top 5, I kind of just got to go for it, which also brings to mind kind of like sidebar, but something that I've kind of like come to the conclusion come to the conclusion with my life, but come to the conclusion this year, especially with everything going on with my mom, everything going on with my work, everything going on in my life, basically. This year's been kind of like not so bizarro for me. I've just had a lot of stuff like constantly going on, personally and professionally. So I kind of just came to the conclusion that my motto's more or less become, you just like, go for it. Like, a lot of things in your life don't really matter, like, significantly. Like, obviously, buying groceries is important, but, like, you know, you gotta eat. But, like, it doesn't really, I don't need to be spending, like, an hour and a half deciding whether I need this type of popcorn and this type of popcorn. It doesn't really matter. Like, you only have so much time. If you want something, you just gotta go for it. So, if you believe something, I go for it. So, when I saw Derrick Henry there, I'm like, I have Derrick Henry currently as my number 4 fantasy back this year. That's really high. The reason why is I'm hoping, don't like to go on hope, but I'm hoping that he will lead the league in rushing touchdowns. We saw Raheem Mostert be a top 5 back, not be terribly efficient, but lead the league in rushing touchdowns. That's what I'm thinking I'm getting with Derrick Henry. Now, granted, Baltimore Ravens backs never stay healthy, and we don't typically like running backs over 30. So I am definitely picking an outlier player in this subset. Derrick Henry is 30. He is in Baltimore. It is a new offensive scheme. He's never played with the offensive lines getting rebuilt. He's never played with a running quarterback like Lamar Jackson. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. But Derrick Henry has been an outlier his entire career. Derrick Henry has been succeeding basically with all the odds against him his entire career. The Ravens are trying to win a Super Bowl. So I think Derrick Henry is still Derrick Henry, and I'm betting on him being an outlier. That's not a great bet. People can say, you know, betting on outliers isn't great, but there are exceptions to every rule, and I think he is the exception as he's proven with his talent over time. And by this point in the draft, I'm like, I can't get one of the other guys. Like, if we are being really, really super honest about it, the guy I wanted in this draft wasn't McCaffrey or Breece Hall or Pachenko or any of those guys. The guy I actually really wanted was Bijan. So Patrick pushing me for Bijan for $80 really annoyed me because I was just like, come on, you had Bijan last year. Just like I know Bijan Robinson's talent. I've seen his talent. You just got to use him properly. He's going to be incredible. I believe in him. Like, I see the Adrian Peterson level of talent Bijan Robinson possesses. If they were just not stupid like Arthur Smith and actually built the offense around him and catered to his strengths, he would be that talented. He's got Hall of Fame level talent at running back. But I wasn't going to pay that. Like, it just doesn't, like, that don't make no sense. So I already paid that much on A.J. Brown. I'm kind of like, I'm already spending a lot of money on a wide receiver I don't love. Let's at least get a running back that I do love. So I went for $66 for Derrick Henry. I'm betting on a big season. What that'll be, I don't know. I mean, if I get like 21 rushing touchdowns, I don't really care about the rushing. I know I'm going to get the 1,000 yards. Other than his foot injury, granted, fingers crossed, but other than his foot injury and basically splitting carries with like Dion Lewis, like 7 years ago, Henry's essentially healthy every single season. And he leads the league. He led the league in carries just last year. And so, even with all the other things going on, I think Derrick Henry is still a top 5 running back, and I think this offense will be perfectly catered to him. So, yeah, Derrick Henry was my pick. I was just like, we got to go for it. If we think he's it, we got to go. So I went. I was going to go up to 70 for him. So at this point, I think, was it 45 overall? Andre nominated Justice Hill because I had already nominated George Mason, and I'm like, well, I don't really like Justice Hill, but we know what happens with Ravens backs. I might as well get the handcuff. Um, I know J.K. Dobbins is gone. Um, I know Gus Edwards is gone. Hill's got to be the guy, the backup. So we'll just go get him. He'll be cheap. Hopefully he doesn't get too many touches because we believe in Derrick Henry. So $4 for Justice Hill, don't mind. So after he did that with Justice Hill, and I already knew about Jordan Mason, I'm like, okay, bet. You have Breece Hall. Breece Hall has injury history too. I'll get his backup. I know exactly who it is. It's Braylon Allen. Why do I know Braylon Allen? Because he's probably the youngest running back he's the youngest running back in this draft class, but he's the youngest running back in any draft class, probably in the last decade. He's really, really young. People don't understand, he was at obviously the University of Wisconsin. So they were usually a running team until they now are trying to turn into an air raid team. But the point is, Braylon Allen's only 20, all right? He was in college for 3 years. He got in at 17. So he's only 20 years old. He came out his junior year. It's very unusual for a junior to leave Wisconsin early, but he didn't really fit the offense last year because they were going into the air raid. But he's a very, very young running back. I know he was only in the 5th round, but he can pass catch. He was a very highly rated recruit. And with Michael Carter being traded last year and subsequently cut, now he's a free agent. Braylon Allen is the guy with the Jets. I mean, I figured he would take the job for the number 2 job behind Breece Hall. I was right. He did take the job as the number 2 running back behind Breece Hall. And I think if something should happen to Breece Hall, which is more likely to happen to him than Christian McCaffrey, then Braylon Allen would be the guy. And he's slippery. He's still learning the position because he's so young, but he has the vision. It's just he needs more reps, and I'm hoping he gets that in practice. But I was just like, you know what? We already got one handcuff who I really like. We might as well get another handcuff to a top 5 running back that we like. Especially because, again, if they're a high-value running back, something happens to them, you just insert someone else, they're a top 10 running back, it's worth it. If I'm getting them under $10, these running backs have more than a pulse. These running backs will be studs. So let's just go. That could make my whole season. 59 overall. Y'all pushed me to $18 on Zach Moss. So I had Jonathan Taylor last year. I traded for Zach Moss before the season. I believe in Zach Moss since he was at the University of Utah, and he got drafted in the 3rd round by Buffalo, by the Bills. And then they already had Devin Singletary there, and then they were trying to do timeshares, and then they got rid of them both, and now they're both starting in other places. Just goes to show Buffalo's bad about picking running backs. But we're going into season 6 of Zach Moss. And this is the first real opportunity in those 6 years he has of being the full-time starter. And when he was with the Colts last year, he was excellent. There were 3 games where he had over 20 fantasy points. He was getting 20, 25 touches a game, and he was a workhorse. And the Colts offensive line, people don't really realize, has kind of fallen off. Quentin Nelson is very good, but he's no longer considered the best guard in football. He's maybe still top 5, but the rest of the O-line's not great. And so Moss being able to do that, basically, if Jonathan Taylor is a top 5 running back, Moss was 95% of Jonathan Taylor in games last year, which is crazy to consider. And Cincinnati has had a workhorse back in Joe Mixon for the past 6 years, I want to say. And so I'm just kind of going into this draft, I had Moss as a target. I had Moss as a target because while he may not be as exciting as Chase Brown, who I drafted later, and we'll get into Chase Brown's stuff, he may not be the most exciting guy. He may not have the breakaway speed. He may not have the incredible physique of Ezekiel Elliott. He may not have the rushing ability of Adrian Peterson. He may not have the breakaway speed of Elijah Mitchell or the pass-catching ability of Christian McCaffrey. What Zach Moss does is he does all those things well. He's a very good pass blocker. He has very good vision. He's a very good rusher. He's a pretty good pass catcher. He does everything well. He doesn't do anything excellent, so it doesn't stick out to you, but he does it all very well. All by the book, all of it Like, if you watch him in those Colts games, I swear it's basically Jonathan Taylor. You're basically watching Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. So he goes to Cincinnati, where they've been feeding Joe Mixon for years. They've brought in backups, and they don't see much time except for, like, P. Ryan catches some passes. But that's it. Like, years and years and years of just Joe Mixon. So I'm going into the season, and they're talking about, there might be a timeshare with Chase Brown. There might be a timeshare with Zach Moss. And I'm just kind of like, I don't really give a crap what the coaches are saying. What are the players saying? What does Joe Burrow say? And something that stuck out to me after the second preseason game was Joe Burrow talked about specifically, Zach Moss is the best blocking running back I've ever played with. That goes back to Clyde Edwards-Helaire in college. That goes back to Joe Mixon in the pros. That goes back to him being at Ohio State. All right, you want to go way back. So he's going to see the field a lot. He's going to be on the field with me a lot. We're going to run 3 wide with Jermaine Burton and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and Moss's specialty is running out of the shotgun. You know who runs the second most plays out of the shotgun? It's the Bengals. The Bengals run the second most plays out of the shotgun of anyone in the NFL. Moss is excellent running out of the shotgun, specifically. Most guys have a hard time doing that. Like Adrian Peterson struggled to do that because they usually need someone ahead of them, like a fullback, to basically open up the holes. But Moss has very good vision. His ability to be able to see the linebacker, manipulate the safety, see the hole, hit it, is very good. Again, he's not excellent at any of these things, but he's good. He's genuinely very good. And so I've been waiting for him to get a chance, and he's finally got the chance. You're damn right I'm going to bet on him. So going to the draft, I wanted him. I didn't really care what the price was on him. I didn't even care if I overpaid. I believe in the talent. So I've always believed in his talent, but now the talent matches the opportunity. So I love, just the same way I believed in Aaron Jones, the same way I believed in Puka Nacua. I mean, that's how I feel about Zach Moss. I felt that way about Zach Moss since he came out as a rookie. The difference is now he actually gets a legitimate opportunity to show it. And so I was going to go for him. I guess I'll mention this. I haven't mentioned defensive players the entire time. But at 60 overall, I spent $6 on Foyce Olakun. Why would you spend money on a defensive player? Well, Olakun specifically has led the league in tackles the last 2 years. He was also, I want to say, 3rd in interceptions last year at linebacker. So, I mean, last year I spent some money on TJ Watt. Usually the way I go about it is I'm going to spend money on one defensive player that I'm going to build that defense around. I can find the other things, but I want one elite defensive player. So usually it's defensive line. This year my 2 targets were Max Crosby and TJ Watt. I don't usually pick a safety like last time I picked up Antoine Winfield Jr. off of free agency. It's pretty easy for me to find elite safeties. It's also pretty easy to find very good linebackers. Like I found Devondre Campbell the last 2 years, and he was a top 10 linebacker both years. But I want one elite player. And I've watched Olakun on Eileen's team just wreck game plans, wreck some of you. I went back and checked the stats for some of those games. There were 5 games that dude had over 20 points. It was crazy. He had a 20 tackle game last season. So I watched that and I'm like, I like TJ Watt. I like Max Crosby. But you want to know who's elite, who's really elite, who's been doing this, and it's not just 1 year fluke kind of thing. He did this the year before too. It's Olakun. So you're taking the injury risk just like a running back with a linebacker. But I was specifically targeting him. He was at the top. And so I was willing to go to $10 for Olakun, specifically because he wrecked some of y'all the last couple of years. So that was literally a draft thing that I put in my notes that I was just I want Olakun. I don't care what the cost is, negligible. I want that kind of player on my team. So getting him, I was very happy. I did not care that it was $6. I targeted him coming into this. 74 overall, $3, Joshua Palmer. All right. This was a late round target that I had. I put him in there. I just snuck him in the late 70s because I'm I'd kind of box myself in, and we'll kind of go into that more. But basically, I'm I've spent a lot of money on A.J. Brown. I've spent a lot of money on Derrick Henry. I just spent a lot of money on, well, not a lot of money, but I spent a reasonable amount of money on Zach Moss. I have 2 backup running backs now on the squad that cost me another $10. I need starters. Like, I have no receivers, essentially, other than A.J. Brown. I need to find something out. So, around that same time, we see, like, was it Jermaine Burton goes, DJ Moore went for 14, I think Brandon A. went to Sarah for 16, Evan Ingram went for 5, so I'm just like, I just need to get somebody who would be a late round target of mine. I just kind of need to sneak him through for under $5. And that guy was Palmer. So what do I like about Palmer? Well, I'll tell you what I don't like first, and then kind of go into the good. So, first, Jim Harbaugh's now the coach of the Chargers, which means Greg Roman's now the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. When they were together on the 49ers for 4 years, they never had a passing offense above 30th in the league. That's bad. They love to run the ball. So, I mean, if you're buying Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and Kamani Vidal, someone's bound to be very good at running the ball if they're healthy. But why do I bring all that up with Palmer? Why would I buy such a bad offense? Well, here's the good. I think Justin Herbert's the best passing quarterback Harbaugh's ever had. So that's number 1. Number 2, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen are gone. And even in those years where Harbaugh and Roman had very high rushing teams, they still had Michael Crabtree, who led the team in catches and was a very good fantasy wide receiver. Now, they drafted Ladd McConkey in the second round. My assumption is, knowing McConkey, he doesn't have a very high average depth of target. He's kind of small, and he doesn't weigh a lot. He's probably going to be the slot receiver. So you might say, it's like, oh, maybe they'll use him as like a Wes Welker. Maybe that's how they'll feed Justin Herbert. My thing is, I kind of did want McConkey. He only went for $3 too. But if I had to choose between him and Palmer, I was actually going to take the veteran. The reason is because I don't like, unless you're taking a guy in like the first round at wide receiver, I don't really think he's going to be like very highly rated or involved in the offense. An example of this is the Packers, who keep taking receivers, and they're all good receivers, but you never actually know who's going to show up when. They all have one thing they're excellent at, but none of them are basically good at everything. Like, they genuinely miss Devontae Adams because Devontae Adams isn't just good, he's excellent at everything. Like, you want those kind of guys. Those are the kind of guys who demand targets. Well, funny enough, Palmer last year, sneakily, while Keenan Allen finished the year very, very well, it's because Palmer got hurt. Missing Mike Williams hurt the Chargers, but it did not hurt them as much as missing Palmer. Palmer in his 10 games was genuinely excellent. He was a starting wide receiver in our fantasy league. That's part of the reason why I was able to trade him and Kyler Murray away for Justin Jefferson. He was very, very good. Now we might be going to a different offense. It's away from Kellen Moore. It is more run-heavy. But again, even on a run-heavy team, there's got to be a wide receiver who's going to make plays, who's going to get the ball. You can't just not, even if we're going super low assumption on how many throws he makes a game, if Justin Herbert throws the ball 25 times, which is a very low amount, be the lowest in the NFL, by the way. So if he throws the ball 25 times, are we saying he's going to split that up between like 5 different guys? Like, are we thinking Quentin Johnson's going to demand like 5 targets? I'm going to tell you now, it's not. He's not going to demand 5 targets. He's bad. Are you going to say like J.K. Dobbins is going to get like 10 targets? Because I don't see that. Are you going to say like Ladd McConkey's going to get like 12 targets? I don't see that. Someone's got to get target share there. And my bet is on Joshua Palmer. So I think Joshua Palmer's the number 1. I think he's going to serve as like the Michael Crabtree kind of esque guy in the Chargers. And if they surprise me and pass more because the league has become more pass heavy, more power to him. So I made a point to go for Palmer. I think his projection's only like 4 receptions and 44 yards in the first game. And I'm just like, that's really low. But they're playing the Raiders. So, I mean, we'll find out. I don't think they're going to be pass heavy as last season. But I still think if I'm going to get a number 1 receiver and I'm going to get him at a deep, deep discount, I don't really care if it's pass heavy or run heavy or not. I think he's worth it. And I need a receiver at this point in the draft. So Let's see if we can see him through. I nominated him. I think Charlie put $1 on him, and I put another dollar on him, and then he was mine. I was like, perfect. Exactly what I want to do. So then 85 overall, $8, Mark Andrews. So I violated my own rule. I already mentioned this, I think, with Leyland's video with Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams, and also Robbie with Isaiah Pachenko and Rashee Rice. And I didn't realize it until I did it with, like, Charlotte's team, but she also has, like, technically Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne, but, I mean, Ingram had a very good season last year. I don't expect a lot of the Cat team, but I overdid Mark Andrews for when I have Derrick Henry. Now, that being said, I'm hoping it can work out, especially because I like Mark Andrews a lot. Like, I still think he's the number one pass-catching option in this Ravens offense. He only played 10 games last year. He was averaging 14 points a game. So he was leading the league in red zone targets in those 10 games. I think he got like 14. So touchdowns and tight ends, man. I think he's a top 3 tight end. Would it have been better if I got Trey McBride or Sam Laporta or I guess maybe Evan Ingram? I didn't really want Evan Ingram, but would have Travis Kelce, would it have been better if I got one of those guys? Yeah, of course. I would prefer that. But if we just take a look at like what Andrews is a very good middle of the field red zone target for Lamar Jackson. I'm betting on lots of touchdowns with the Ravens, if you haven't noticed. Like, I'm really buying in the Ravens offense. I'm betting on Derrick Henry and Mark Andrews. So if one of you sees this and you're just like, oh, I'll trade for Mark Andrews, I'm not really going to give you a discount on him. I mean, I might, depending on the players, but I just think he's a very high-level player. Before last season, he was very healthy. He's like 14 red zone targets is a lot. That basically means he led the league in the passing or the receiving in the red zone, and Derrick Henry leads the team in rushing in the red zone. So I'm going to get all of the Ravens' touchdowns. And the Ravens are one of the most high-scoring teams in the NFL. So, yeah, that wasn't great. I loved the price on him, though. I was thinking someone would have pushed me for more. I was like, oh, well, I think he's worth at least $10. I got him for $8, and I'm just like, well, I'm kind of stuck here, but if I'm kind of stuck here, I might as well just kind of, like, live with it. At least he's a good player, and I'm not stuck with, like, some crappy combo of, like, Rico Dowdle or Ezekiel Elliott and, like, God, I don't even know who the number 2 is on. Brandon Cooks. Something like that. Something stupid like that where I'm just like, this is really dumb. Neither of these guys should be starters. Henry and Andrews are definitely starters in our league. It just so happens they play on the same team, and I kind of shot myself in the foot there. So that was a second mistake. By this point, I'm seeing a problem. And here's the problem. I actually probably noticed the problem with Moss. So the problem is, in our league, we limit how many running backs you can get on your team. We limit that to 6. Well, by this point, I have Jordan Mason, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, Braylon Allen, and Zach Moss. Coming in the draft, I was hoping to get some low, cheap starters. These players include, but are not limited to, Devin Singletary. I also kind of liked... Who was it on the back end? I liked Brian Robinson Jr., but he went for a lot to Robbie. I thought he'd be much cheaper than that. Someone else that I really liked coming in the draft was Chuba Hubbard on Carolina. I mean, if I really got desperate, I guess Ezekiel Elliott, but I wasn't going to. I knew he was going to go for cheap, but I was just like, nah, I don't know if I want to do that. Najee Harris, actually, because of Arthur Smith, was another guy that I was kind of like, I can get him probably for $20, and that was a good guess. I was right. Someone else was like, I think DeAndre Swift, too, because I think Chicago will be a little bit more run-heavy. Javonte Williams, I also thought would go under 15. So all those guys ended up being exactly where I thought they would go for, like, cheaper rates. But the problem is, by taking the high-value handcuffs, I've kind of handcuffed myself by this point in the draft. I can only take one more running back. I'm going to max out my RB room before anyone else in this draft. And I kind of know who the last RB has to be at this point. So that was something where I boxed myself in, because what I wanted to do was kind of get a few starting running backs and maybe get like a couple handcuffs. So like we're talking like, if I get Derrick Henry and Justice Hill, and then I get like, I don't know, Zach Moss and Chase Brown, then I can take like Devin Singletary, and we can take like someone like DeAndre Swift, and that'll be the running back room, and I can always move Swift or Singletary for stuff. Well, that's not what happened, because I went for Mason and Braylon Allen. Now, granted, I don't genuinely regret getting Mason or Allen. It just kind of sucks in our league that we limit running backs, which is also part of the reason why next year I'm just like, I'm gonna push to like have the limit on running backs pushed to 7. My also argument is people are just like, oh, well, what if someone hoards running backs? My argument to that is, when we do an auction draft now, you have access to literally anyone. If you allow yourself to be low on running backs, that's kind of your fault now. So just because you only want 3 running backs does not mean that I only want 3 running backs. You should probably draft more. And you might say, well, there's not a lot of running backs on free agency. And my rebuttal to that would be, it's like, yeah, well, that's why I'm trying to change it to be point per first down, to kind of make it free agency a little bit more vibrant for both running backs. I also want to raise quarterback scoring for 5 points per touchdown and negative 2.5 for interceptions. These are things that I've noticed, especially because we've gone 5 years of lower scoring in the NFL. We're basically scoring like it's 1995. So if it happens again, I'm going to push very hard to increase scoring. And those are I think, the best options to do that in a way that's such that it doesn't imbalance everything. If we want to talk about maybe doing point per first down and making kind of it like a midstream, and what I mean by that is keeping half PPR for half a point, giving wide receivers a half a point for a first down, giving running backs a half a point per first down, then we can talk about that too. But I think it's important to increase scoring, not only to make free agency more vibrant, but also keeping in line with the scoring of the NFL, which is going down, which is very not good. The difference between like freaking, we'll say Lad McConkey this year and like Michael Wilson is very negligible. There's a lot of guys you can just pick up off free agency, kind of throw them in your lineup at flex and kind of walk away. So like, that's because scoring is down. They're all going to score like 6 points. So I'm trying to increase scoring a little bit, and that's why I'm making that. But that's also why I'm trying to increase basically how many running backs you can carry, because of stuff like this, where I'm just like, really? I'm like boxed in like this? Like this would be, I could legitimately get like another starting running back and just kind of have him useful on my bench, but because I've taken these handcuffs now, I am boxed in. So yeah, as I mentioned, I boxed myself in. I had taken 5 running backs. I need to take a 6th running back, but unfortunately, I already know who that is. And you guys were pushing me for some stupid reason on Chase Brown for $10. Some of you might think Chase Brown is very good. I don't. So I watched Chase Brown. I watched him at college. I watched him in the NFL last year. Here's the thing. He's a 5th-round pick. It's not bad. Braylon Allen's a 5th-round pick. Is he explosive? Yeah, he had like one good pass-catching run last year. He's got a bit of speed. I think he averaged like 14.4 yards on screen passes, but there's not a whole lot of stuff you have to do on a screen pass. He has good like contact balance. His ability to like shed tacklers and bounce off blockers is good, but I don't think his vision's very good. He would have been a higher draft pick if it was. I don't think his pass blocking is very good because, well, quite frankly, it's bad. You can go watch the film for yourself. It's not great. And I don't think he's a very good rusher because the vision's not good, so he doesn't really see the holes very often. Like, he's a very inefficient guy. I suppose if you kind of just insert him and push him, eventually he'll have, like, those 1 or 2 breakaway plays, like, every 4 or 5 games. And be like, oh, my God, he had this huge, crazy run. And I'm just like, yeah, but then he had all of these runs where he ran for, like, 2 yards to get to that run. Like, it's not good running back play. So I don't really know why if quite a few of you pushed me to get Chase Brown for 10. Maybe you just wanted to punish me because you knew I wanted Chase Brown because I took Zach Moss. I don't know. I would have preferred, like, Devin Singletary, who is a starter, or Ezekiel Elliott, who is a starter, or Zamir White, who went for 18 and is a starter, over bidding for Chase Brown, who is not a starter, and I don't think is very talented. And I know some people, I think Sarah mentioned, it's like, oh, I think Chase Brown might be this starter. I don't. Like, I've seen him. I've watched him. I watch every Steelers game, so I watch a lot of the AFC North. I don't believe in Chase Brown. I think he's fast, but he doesn't actually know how to play running back. So there are people, analysts, who say, oh, there's a lot to like. Really what they like is the speed. They're falling in love with the speed. But him actually being able to play running back, all the nuance to the position, he does not have. He might learn it. That might occur. But I think Zach Moss is pound for pound the better running back. Like, easily. Not close. He does everything well. Chase Brown does one thing well. And that one thing isn't even something he does well. It's just an attribute that he has, which is speed. So, yeah, y'all pushed me for $10 for Chase Brown. I did not love that. I was very annoyed with that. I was going to get him because I felt like, if something happens to Moss, I should get Brown. Or if the Bengals go stupid and decide to start Brown, then we want to protect ourselves. But I'm not a fan of Chase Brown. I don't have any real belief in Chase Brown. I think if you gave him the starting job, we would be getting like a bunch of 60 yards weeks, and then 1 week he might go for a long touchdown, and then everyone would be talking again about what talent he has, and I'd be like, yeah, he has speed. There were guys blocking in front of him. He broke free for a touchdown. Cool. Tell me what he's doing the other 19 times he touches the ball. He's getting 2 yards. It's not great. It's very inefficient and not good. So, yeah, I kind of boxed myself in. I already knew that watching the draft the way it was going. And I was saving some money in case you guys pushed me on Chase Brown. You did, and that was annoying. But I was going to go get him. So by this point, I'm like, well, crap. I am boxing on running backs. I can't get any more running backs. And that also goes into something else I'll add, because this is my draft. This is the second time in the entire time that I've been in this league where I have not gone triple running back in my starting lineup. Every single season I have started 2 running backs and a running back at flex, except for one. The one season was 2020, and that was my worst season. That's the only season I did not make the playoffs. That's the season when Julio Jones fell apart. That's the season when Brandon Cooks was not great, and I cut him. And that was the season I had DeAndre Hopkins and like a bunch of nobodies, and I couldn't figure out number 2 running back, and I traded for Le'Veon Bell, and then he got cut by the Jets. Nothing was going right. And so I did not make the playoffs that year. So I do not like going away from triple running back. But I am not stupid. I know that first I boxed myself in. I had already recognized this after the Braylon Allen pick, so we're talking like a while ago. Like, we weren't even done with pick 50, so this is before Moss and before Brown. I'd already decided I wanted to go for Moss. Before the draft. So I was like, okay, I've kind of boxed myself in. I need to make targets late in the draft for like receivers that I actually like. We gotta adjust basically midstream to figure out something that we're gonna do. So that's part of the reason why I went for Palmer at 74. This was another guy that I nominated that I was gonna go for, so I'm gonna gun for him. So 106 overall, $7, Cortland Sutton. I've been on Sutton since he came out of the draft. So I know that people are not high on Sutton because, he's failed to be a top 30 receiver 3 years in a row. Not to mention he had 10 touchdowns last year, and he still didn't get in the top 30. I think he only had 60 receptions last year. He didn't have a whole lot. So it wasn't great. Yeah, so he had 59 receptions. He had 64 the year before and 58 the year before. And he's only broken 1,000 yards one time. And that was his second year in 2019, and we're going into year 7. So if all of that is true, why would I want Cortland Sutton? Well, I've thought of Sutton as very talented for a long time. The way I mentioned Josh Palmer is kind of like being the Michael Crabtree in the Chargers offense. I think Sutton basically is Michael Crabtree. He's not the fastest guy, but he's physical, he's strong, he's tall, and he fights for the ball. He's towards the back end of his prime. He's 29, so I'm hoping we're not going to get like Brandon Cooks falls apart at 30. Julio Jones falls apart at 32. I don't think Sutton falls apart at 29. And the other thing is, Sean Payton is there. I still believe Sean Payton is an offensive savant. Quite frankly, he made Drew Brees a Hall of Fame quarterback. Him getting rid of Russell Wilson I see as a net positive. The reason why I think he got rid of Russell Wilson is because Russell Wilson didn't really fit the offense they wanted to run. Warren Sharp's book more or less confirmed that for me reading it this summer. Russell basically did a bunch of checkdowns, and then he'd occasionally throw a moonshot deep. But he doesn't run the offense. What made Drew Brees great was his ability to quickly go up to the line, figure out what coverage you're running, and quickly make a decision under 2 seconds. It was very, very fast. The one thing I can say about Bo Nix is he started the most games in college of any quarterback ever. He started 64 games because he started 5 years in college, counting the COVID year, 2 seasons at Auburn, 3 seasons at Oregon, and he makes decisions really quickly. That is why Sean Payton drafted him so high. I think if you gave Sean Payton the choice between, we'll take Caleb Williams out of it, but if you gave him the choice between Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., and Drake May, and Bo Nix, you gave him those 5 guys, I think he'd still pick Bo Nix, because Bo Nix is such a perfect tailored fit for him. So why is that important? Well, if Sean Payton believes that Bo Nix is the perfect fit for him, and Sean Payton had an incredible season with Michael Thomas, he had incredible seasons with Jimmy Graham, he had incredible seasons with Marcus Colston, incredible seasons with Reggie Bush, he had any number of receivers you could think of, basically. Brandon Cook started his career in the Saints. He had an incredible season with the Saints. He had any number of receivers basically succeed with him, with Drew Brees. So if Bo Nix is thought of kind of like can run the offense like Drew Brees, I want a piece of that. Okay. Who's the number 1? Well, Jerry Jeudy's gone. They traded away Noah Fant, so the tight ends aren't really there. Devontae Williams is not pass-catching back. They cut Samaje Perine. Jaleel McLaughlin is a rusher. Who's number 1? Well, the number 1 is Cortland Sutton. So this has less to do with Sutton. This has less to do with Bo Nix. This has everything to do with Sean Payton. I think the offensive line is good. I think Sean Payton is one of the best and brightest offensive minds in the world. And he's got to prove it with Bo Nix. He's got to develop him fast. If he can, then Sutton is a number one wide receiver. And I'm getting him on the very, very cheap. Right now, I think he's a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. But I'm hoping, I don't really like to go on hope, but I'm thinking that he can get 1,000 yards. He can get his 10 touchdowns. He can be one of the best receivers in the league because the talent's always been there. He's just been trapped in Denver with crap. There was the Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson experiment. There was the, God, I don't even remember who it was. They took a guy in Dak Prescott's year, and he was out of Memphis, and he was a quarterback. Let's see, Memphis quarterback, QB, Denver. And he's out of the league now, and they drafted him, Paxton Lynch. Yeah, it's been a mess for the 7 years that Sutton's been there. It's been a mess since Peyton Manning exited Denver. There was the year they had Joe Flacco, but they didn't have enough actual blocking in front of him to be able to do what Flacco does because he's a statue. It was all bad. It's been all bad in Denver for a while, basically since Manning exited stage right in 2015. So Sutton's been there since 2017, just kind of chilling and just being somebody come save me. So might this not work out? Yeah, of course it might not work out. Just like with Palmer, these are very late round dudes that I'm taking, thinking that everything says about their opportunity should work out well, especially because I'm also believing in the coaching staff on these teams. I don't really, the same way I didn't believe in Adam Gase with the Jets, I do believe in Jim Harbaugh. I do believe in Sean Payton. Obviously, I would love to have everyone on Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan or even Mike McDaniel's teams. I think they have incredible offensive players. But you have to pay a cost for those guys. These guys are cheap because these teams haven't been good for a while. And Dylan needs some cheap wide receivers right now because he spent a lot of money on some running backs and A.J. Brown. And that's why taking A.J. Brown was a mistake. That's probably why taking the Both of the handcuff backs might not work out for me because I boxed myself in at running back and I couldn't take some good running backs in the back end of the draft. But I was like, if this is what we're doing, if we're doubling down on this, then we got to go get our targets. And Sutton was my target. I spent $7 for him. I'm happy with it. Which brings into question the next pick, which is 144 overall, which is Jaden Daniels. I got him for $1. Coming in the draft, there were only 2 quarterbacks that I really wanted. Seeing Josh Allen go for 15, I was kind of unhappy because I would have taken him at that price. But the 2 quarterbacks that I wanted, I pushed Robbie on Anthony Richardson for 13. But the 2 were Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels. I wanted Kyler Murray. I was trying to get Kyler Murray. Justin wasn't letting me have Kyler Murray, so I'm just like, okay, maybe I can get Daniels on the back end. So by this point in the draft, I'm saving money. I'm like, okay, I needed money for Chase Brown, saved money. I need money for Courtland Sutton, saved money. I'm going after targets. I'm not going after players who are just getting kind of thrown out there. These are people specifically that I have targeted that I want. And so I wanted Kyler Murray, but I don't want to get into a bidding war for him. It's not worth it to me to spend like $10, $12 on Kyler Murray, especially when I saw Josh Allen go for 15. Let's see if we can kind of sneak Jaden Daniels through. My one concern was if Robbie wants his stupid backup quarterback and that quarterback happens to be Jaden Daniels, I'm going to be screwed because he's just going to spend his last $10 on him. Luckily, Robbie did not do that. His target was Jordan Love, who I was not targeting. My target was Jaden Daniels. So, why Jaden Daniels? The simple answer is this. He won the Heisman last year. Like Nix, he's an older player. He was in the college for 5 years, so he's 23. He is in a Cliff Kingsbury offense. That name ought to sound familiar. He was the head coach for the Cardinals for Kyler Murray's first 5 years, I want to say. So he basically turned Murray into like a running, passing to DeAndre Hopkins, high-flying, air raid, college-esque offense. Well, Daniels comes from like an air raid offense with LSU. Daniels has a pretty good offensive line. He's a pretty good running back in Brian Robinson Jr. He's a pretty good number 1 in Terry McLaurin. He's a pretty good tight end with, funny enough, Zach Ertz is there. Didn't know that. Found that out. Didn't know that till I found that out. Like Warren Sharp's like, really? Zach Ertz is still here? I thought he retired. What's he doing in Washington? So there's a lot of things to like there. I don't love the coach. I think Dan Quinn failed after. I think Dan Quinn gets a lot of credit for going to the Super Bowl when I credit that to Kyle Shanahan. And second, I think he gets a lot of credit for rebuilding that Dallas offense or defense when that was a lot to do with just turnovers by the players. I don't give him a lot of credit for either of those things. However, Cliff Kingsbury is a good offensive coach. I don't think he's a good head coach. He's a good offensive coordinator. So all of that is to say, I didn't want Caleb Williams. I didn't want Anthony Richardson. I didn't want Jordan Love. I didn't want Tua Tagovailoa. I didn't want Kirk Cousins. The guy I wanted was Jaden Daniels because I thought I could get him for $1. And I think I can have like a rookie kind of season like RG3, and hopefully he stays healthy. But Daniels' rushing ability really intrigues me. I think he has got a shot at being a top 5 quarterback in fantasy because he's such a prolific rusher. Rushing quarterbacks might scare you, but there's a lot of rushing quarterbacks in the NFL now. Josh Allen rushes. Jalen Hurts rushes. Lamar Jackson rushes. Anthony Richardson rushes. Kyler Murray rushes. Do they get hurt? Yeah, sure they do. Could Daniels get hurt? Yeah, sure he could. He's a rookie, though. We're going to run the read option. We're going to spread it out. We're going to run the air raid. We're going to try and just, like, go guns blazing, run a lot of plays, and he's going to have to scramble. And so I was surprised to get him for $1. I thought someone would have pushed me on him. But yeah, I loved that. Like, I was saving money for that. I didn't even use all of my money because I ended up getting him for so cheap. I was surprised that happened. I kind of wish I used more money on other players, and if I'd known I'd get Daniels for $1. But that's how it worked out. So that was a surprise to get my starting quarterback so late, especially someone with such high upside. 156, $2, Marquise Hollywood Brown. So people are on Xavier Worthy, having the fastest 40 time in NFL Combine history, taking him in the first round of the Chiefs. People are on Rashee Rice and how good he looks in the slot. That's why Robbie took him. The most accomplished deep threat receiver on the Chiefs is Hollywood Brown. I mean, people forget he had a 1,000-yard season with the Ravens with Lamar Jackson winning MVP rushing the ball. Like, that's how unheard of his 1,000-yard season was. I mean, people forget, like, he had, like, a broken foot a couple years ago in Arizona, and then he came back, and him and DeAndre Hopkins were, like, lighting up the world until Kyler Murray got hurt. I mean, he had 7 touchdowns of 40 yards or more for 3 consecutive seasons in Baltimore, so 2019, 2020, and 2021. And I think Patrick Mahomes, we're going back to a pass-heavy offense, especially now that we've fixed up the offense. I mean, people might like Xavier Worthy. I think he's really raw, but he's got a lot of speed. Brown's got a lot of speed. And we've seen Andy Reid offenses before, like there was the Jerry Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, Eagles offense. Obviously, there's the Tyreek Hill, like Martez Valdez-Scantling offense, and I don't really like MVS, but he's fast. Basically, Reid's always liked fast players. He's just always wanted fast players. I think if Rashee Rice is kind of the security blanket, I think Hollywood Brown and not Xavier Worthy is the deep threat. And so I'm betting on Brown. He's a boomer bust type of guy. I mean, he already injured his shoulder. He gets injured quite a bit. I'm paying $2 for him. Like, I want a piece of that Chiefs offense. I want somebody on the cheap. I wasn't getting Kelsey on the cheap. I'm not getting Worthy on the cheap. I'm not getting Mahomes on the cheap. I'm not getting, like, freaking Rashee Rice. I mean, he did go on the cheap. That kind of disappointed me, but we're already boxed in. So I got Hollywood Brown on the cheap. I think he's the number 2 receiver, if not the number 1. And I got him for $2. I like that. I think he'll get his 1,000 yards. Could I be wrong? Yeah, sure I could be wrong. Ooh, somebody's calling. Well, I'm just going to have to let that ring because I'm not going to get it. Yeah, it sounds like a spam call anyway. Let's see. 194, I took Jalen Polk from the Patriots. I'm thinking about dropping him, but he's on my team currently right now. So here's what I like, here's what I don't like. The Patriots' offensive line's bad. I think whoever's the quarterback's going to get killed. For now, it's Jacoby Brissett. They're probably right to do that and protect the rookie Drake May. I don't think the offense is going to be very good. They just, yeah. So I think Ramondre Stevenson might do something because rushing-wise, they might be okay. Passing-wise, they won't. All that's to say, I don't really know what to make of this offense. I don't like something I made a point of in this draft was to try and take players on offenses that I liked. I like Jim Harbaugh. We're going to take a piece of the Chargers offense. I like Andy Reid. We're going to take a piece of the Chiefs offense. I like John Harbaugh. We're going to take 2 pieces of the Ravens offense. That was a mistake. I like Kellen Moore. We're going to take a piece of A.J. Brown for the Philadelphia Eagles offense. I like Sean Payton. We're going to take Cortland Sutton. That was literally a point I made in this draft. So Polk is just like the random guy at the back end where I'm just like, I don't like the Patriots offense. But I mean, by this point, I'm like sitting on money, and what do we think? So what we think is this. Polk was the number 2 receiver in Washington for the Washington Huskies last year. All these senior receivers for the Huskies. So first was Rome Odunze, who went number 9 overall to Chicago. Third was Jalen McMillan, who went like in the 3rd round of the Bucs, and I thought was like the 2nd best receiver on that team, but he was hurt most of last season, so he fell. And the guy in between them was Jalen Polk. So Polk, unlike Odunze, is the physically gifted one. McMillan is the technician. He's great in the slot. He really understands space. Polk is kind of in between. Like, he's got more raw talent than McMillan, but not as good, not as much talent as Odunze, and he's a better route runner than Odunze, but not as good as McMillan. So, all of that is to say, rookie wide receivers sometimes work out, sometimes they're Justin Jefferson, but it's rare. You don't really know that. But if it doesn't work out, I'll just cut him, especially because I don't really believe in the Patriots offense. However, they took him in the second round. They need talent desperately at receiver. Like, we're talking Kendrick Bourne is like their number one, and he's hurt. I mentioned in Andre's video, we took Demario Pop Douglas as their spot receiver. Like, these guys, this ain't the Packers' young offensive like receivers. They are bleeding receivers. They need receivers for the Patriots. I don't know if Polk is the guy, but I know he's starting for them. I know he's pretty talented. I don't think to start the season he'll be great, but I'm wanting to see what happens towards the end of the year, because my bet is towards the end of the year they bring in Drake May, maybe the offensive line meshes, and maybe it becomes not a terrible offense and it's average, and Polk takes a surprise step. I don't know if that will happen. Obviously, if I knew if that would happen, I would spend more money and would have drafted him higher. But by this point in the draft, I got all my running backs. I'm filling up defensive players. I have all my starting receivers. I have my starting quarterback. I just want to find some upside. The upside is this rookie kid who I like his talent coming out of the draft. He's in a bad situation. I'm not sure it'll mean anything. But you have to be, like I tell everyone every year with rookies, you have to be really, really patient with them. You got to give them like 8 weeks. Like, that's a long time to wait. So if you don't want to wait or your season's slipping, then you got to cut them loose. But I usually want to take at least 1 or 2 guys who I think, oh, I really like them. I think they're really good on the back end, and just kind of see how they develop. Like, it took Justin Jefferson 4 weeks to get the job. It took Alvin Kamara 4 weeks to get the job. It took OBJ like 3 weeks after a suspension to get the job. Like, it takes time for coaches to actually learn to trust the rookies. But once they trust the rookies and they actually take it, sometimes they can make your whole season. That's part of the reason why I picked up Puka Nacua last year. If it's the very end of my draft and I'm looking for something, I'm not going to take some veteran guy who, like, I know what he is. And sure, he might be in a better situation, but I don't really care. Like, people were worried about Puka last year because, Matthew Stafford's coming off injury. Cooper Kupp's not there. Cam Akers is like the starting running back. We're not really sure. This offense looks bad. The O-line doesn't look good. Don't care. Literally don't give a crap. Why? Because I think he's a really talented player. And unlike, earlier in the draft where I maybe don't want to take that risk, I'm willing to take the risk late because it doesn't really matter. Like, oh no, it doesn't work out, I'll cut him. But Puka really worked out for me, obviously, very well. He broke the rookie record for most receiving yards ever. So, is Polk going to do that? Obviously, I don't think so. But I'm willing to take the risk because he's a talented player. He's a young, talented player. Maybe in an offense that's a great unknown. I may not believe in them, but it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what I think of the guy. And I think the guy is really talented. So, yeah, late in the draft, I want to take one of the targets. He was the guy. So, I might get rid of him. I might dump him. We'll see. Obviously, this is the longest video. If you're offended by that, I am sorry. But I just want to give you kind of like my thinking of what I did in this draft, why I made the choices I did, why I went the way I did. If I could do it all over, yeah, I probably keep Jordan Mason, but I don't take Braylon Allen, and I take someone who's a starter on the back end so they can like start for me in the flex, so I'm not starting Palmer. I would have liked that. I probably maybe spend more money on Kyler Murray, I suppose. I would have liked that. I mean, if we're really being honest, I'd probably take all the money for like A.J. Brown and I spread it across the team, and I'd probably do something like, I don't know, Keenan Allen went for $9, and like David Montgomery went for $9, and Terry McLaurin went for $14. I would have really, really liked something like that. I mean, that kills like the back end of my team, and I don't really have a starter per se, like a star number one receiver, so that's the drawback. But I don't know. It really is going to come down to, can A.J. Brown be what he was in the first half and not be what he was in the second half? I don't really have any questions about Henry. I think I'm very happy with Jaden Daniels, so I'm not even worried about that. I think Cortland Sutton will actually be surprisingly good. I think Mark Andrews will do what he does. It's really a question of, can Palmer be something? Is Zach Moss who I think he is? And is A.J. Brown going to like be that second star? I'm willing to bet on Moss. I don't know about Palmer. And Brown, I almost basically need him to be excellent. I put myself at 10, though, because there are just other drafts where I think people did a very good job. I think all of the out-of-town guys have, like, higher drafts than I do. So, like, Robbie, Brian, Justin, Ryan, Stefan, Mackenzie, all of you guys have better drafts than I do. Because you have just more depth. You have more, like, flexibility with your teams. I'm kind of locked in. The only difference might be my season might be made if a few things happen. And that's kind of what I went for. It's like if Andre has this injury to one of those star running backs, I'm in a really good position. If Jalen Polk becomes hopefully something, I'm in a really good position. If Zach Moss is who I think he is, I'm in a good position. But that all kind of depends realistically on A.J. Brown. I don't love that. I like A.J. Brown, but I'm scared of how his season ended last year, and my team is kind of built around that right now, and that's not a great proposition. It would be a lot more comfortable if I was running 3 running backs. But again, I boxed myself in. I try to do that with the handcuff running backs. That was my own choice. I was aware of it while it was happening. I was like, we got to kind of figure this out on the back end. I did my best to. I got players that I liked, but it's still not exactly great. Again, I'm hoping maybe we change things up next year. Maybe we allow a team to carry 7 running backs. Like, I know people might be really against that, but, like, you should be able to build the team you want, like, within the rules. Like, it's not – you can load up on receivers. I understand, like, running backs are really important, but, like, also if we pass the changes to the point system, I think that'd be really good and healthy for the league because we do need to increase scoring. You can even say it's just like, oh, well, the wide receivers don't score enough. I mean, if we go to point per first down, or if we do the other one with half PPR, and then point per first down kind of thing, like, that would help them too. It would lift everybody's scoring, which would be good in this atmosphere. So, yeah, I like the team. I don't love the team. I don't like that I hitched my wagon to A.J. Brown, but we're going to see. And that's why this is the longest video. I hope I gave you, like, some insight to my thoughts. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're excited for the season. We start tomorrow. Later on.